Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cultural Intelligence for an Inclusive Workplace, a workshop designed specifically for agents of change continuing education. My name is Dr. Danielle Henry. My friends affectionately call me Dr. Danny, and I'll be your guide through this important topic. This is a recorded session, so feel free to pause, rewind, and revisit any sections as needed. We have about, at minimum, 60 minutes of content planned, packed with insights and practical applications that I hope you'll find valuable for your professional journey as social workers and therapists. So, our objectives. Before we dive in, let's quickly review them for this workshop. By the time you complete this module, you should be able to clearly define what culture and cultural intelligence are. We'll break down the 4 capabilities of CQ and discuss their direct relevance to your work as social workers and therapists. A significant part of our time will be spent analyzing a real-life scenario, applying the CQ framework to understand and improve interactions. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, you'll have the opportunity to develop a personal CQ action plan, giving you concrete steps to apply these learnings. And ultimately, we want you to reinforce the critical importance of CQ for ethical and impactful social work and therapeutic practice. So let's start with the foundational concept. Culture itself, what exactly is it? We often talk about culture, but do we know its full, concise definition? At its core, culture is a shared blueprint. It's a set of beliefs, values, norms, and behaviors that a group of people use to make sense of the world and interact with each other. It's deeply ingrained, often operating unconsciously, influencing everything from how we communicate to how we perceive time or authority. The quote, as noted here, from psychologists Daniel Ames and Susan Fiske says, "Culture is, after all, stored in people's brains." It really emphasizes this point. It's not just about something external. It's about literally shaping our cognitive processes. This idea is explored further in the emerging field of cultural neuroscience, which studies how our brains are wired by our cultural experiences. Understanding this deep connection helps us appreciate why cultural differences can be so profound and sometimes challenging to navigate. So, when we think about culture in a professional context, it's helpful to distinguish between the two key dimensions, and they are cognitive culture and emotional culture. Cognitive culture, often synonymous with corporate culture, deals with the explicit intellectual aspects. These are the shared values, norms, and assumptions that guide how an organization functions. Think about a company's mission statement. Its stated values like innovation or customer centricity or its formal policies. These are typically conveyed verbally through training, meetings, and written documents. Emotional culture, on the other hand, is more subtle but equally powerful. It's about the unspoken rules regarding emotions. Which emotions are acceptable to express, or which are better to suppress? For instance, is it okay to show frustration in a meeting, or is a calm, composed demeanor always expected? This dimension is often conveyed non-verbally through body language, facial expressions, and even the tone of voice used in interactions. Recognizing both cognitive and emotional culture cues is vital for effective communication. Now let's introduce the core concept of our workshop, cultural intelligence, or CQ. It's crucial to understand that CQ goes beyond cultural awareness or sensitivity. While those are important starting points, CQ is the capability, the actual ability to function effectively when you're interacting with people from different cultural backgrounds. The exciting part about CQ is that it's a learnable skill. So you can learn this. It's not an innate personality trait you either have or don't. Through dedicated learning, gaining experience, and intentional practice, you can significantly improve your CQ. Why does this matter? In today's diverse workplaces and communities, CQ is essential. It empowers us to adapt our approaches, communicate more effectively, and build stronger, more meaningful relationships across cultural divides. This is particularly vital in fields like social work and therapy, where you constantly engage with individuals from varied backgrounds. You might be familiar with the term cultural competence. While valuable, cultural competence often focuses on acquiring knowledge about particular cultures and then demonstrating appropriate behaviors based on that knowledge. This can sometimes lead to a checklist approach. If I'm working with someone from culture X, I should do Y. Now, cultural intelligence, however, represents an evolution of this concept. Instead of just knowing facts about one culture, CQ emphasizes your ability to adapt and learn in new cultural situations. It's about developing a flexible mindset and a versatile skill set that allows you to navigate any cultural encounter, even those you haven't encountered before. The shift is profound from knowing what to do in a specific culture to knowing how to learn and adapt in any cultural context. This adaptability is key in our rapidly changing world. So, cultural intelligence isn't a single skill, but rather a combination of four interconnected capabilities. Think of them as the four pillars supporting your ability to effectively engage across cultures. First, we have CQ Drive, which is the why, your motivation, interest, and confidence in engaging with diverse settings. Next is CQ Knowledge, the what, your understanding of cultural similarities and differences. Then comes CQ Strategy, the how, your ability to plan for and make sense of culturally diverse experiences. And finally, CQ Action, the do, your capability to adapt your verbal and nonverbal behavior. These four capabilities don't operate in isolation. They work synergistically, meaning they influence and strengthen each other to enable truly effective cross-cultural interactions. So let's take a deep dive into each capability, starting with CQ Drive or motivation. This is the why behind your engagement. It's your genuine interest, your persistence when things get challenging, and your confidence in your ability to navigate diverse cultural settings. Key indicators of high CQ Drive include a true curiosity about other cultures, not just a superficial interest, but a desire to truly understand. And it's also about finding enjoyment in these interactions and having a belief in yourself that you can handle the complexities that arise. And importantly, it's about resilience, the ability to bounce back and keep trying, even when cultural misunderstandings occur. For social workers and therapists, high CQ Drive means actively seeking to understand a client's cultural background, even if it's completely new to you. It means staying motivated even when there are initial communication barriers, when a client's worldview differs significantly from your own, or when you encounter subtle cultural cues in the therapeutic space that you don't immediately understand. Instead of seeing cultural differences as obstacles, a professional with high CQ drive sees them as opportunities for deeper connection and more effective support or therapeutic work. Next is CQ knowledge or cognition. This is your what. This is your what. What? Why are we doing this? This refers to your understanding of cultural similarities and differences. It's about having both general knowledge about how cultures operate and specific knowledge about particular cultural groups you might encounter. This knowledge encompasses several key areas: your cultural systems, understanding differences in economic, legal, religious, family, educational, and artistic systems. So these systems profoundly impact the daily life and worldview. Your cultural values, recognizing core values like individualism versus collectivism, how power is distributed, which is power distance, how comfortable people are with ambiguity, which is uncertainty avoidance, masculinity, femininity, and also the likes of long-term voices versus short-term orientation, communication styles, and awareness of direct or versus indirect communication, and high context versus low context communication. And then social norms, knowing about appropriate greetings, personal space, expressions of respect, and even concepts of time, which can vary widely. So for social workers and therapists, CQ knowledge is incredibly practical. For instance, knowing that in some cultures, family elders hold significant decision-making authority will inform you how to approach family meetings, or understanding that direct eye contact can be seen as disrespectful in certain cultures will guide your nonverbal communication. Crucially, for therapists, this also means understanding culturally specific expressions of distress, the stigma around mental health in different communities, or traditional healing practices. This knowledge is vital for conducting effective initial assessments, facilitating family discussions, and designing culturally resonant therapeutic interventions. CQ strategy or metacognition is the how. This is your ability to make sense of culturally diverse experiences and to plan your approach. It's about thinking about your own thinking. That's basically what sums it up. Thinking about your own thinking when it comes to culture. There are 3 steps in CQ strategy. Awareness. This is about being present and noticing cultural cues as they happen. It's also about recognizing your own cultural assumptions and biases that might be influencing your interpretations. Planning. Before you even step into a cross-cultural interaction, can you strategize? Can you anticipate potential cultural challenges and think about how you might navigate them? This involves preparing contingency plans. And the 3rd step is checking/reflecting. This is a continuous process. During and after an interaction, you should be asking yourself, did my approach work? Was my interpretation accurate? What could I do differently next time? This is reflective practice is vital for learning and growth. In the context of social work and therapy, imagine you're preparing for a home visit or a first therapy session with a new client from a different cultural background. A professional with strong CQ strategy will reflect on any known cultural practices of the family or client and plan how they'll introduce themselves respectfully. Consider how to phrase sensitive questions and think about how to interpret responses. Then, during the interaction, they'd be actively observing and adjusting their approach based on real-time cultural cues, always considering how cultural background might influence their client's presentation of symptoms or their comfort with self-disclosure. Finally, we come to CQ action or behavior. The do. This is your actual capability to adapt your verbal and nonverbal behavior when interacting with people from different cultural backgrounds. It's about having a flexible repertoire of responses you can draw upon. Behavioral adaptation includes verbal adaptation. This could mean consciously slowing down your speech, adjusting your tone, choosing simpler vocabulary, or even being more or less direct with your language, depending on the cultural context. Nonverbal adaptation. This is equally important. It involves modifying your gestures, facial expressions, posture, how close you stand to someone, or the amount of eye contact you make. And then there's contextual adaptation. Crucially, it's about knowing when to adapt and when it's appropriate to maintain your own cultural norms. For instance, while you might adapt your communication style, you wouldn't compromise your professional boundaries. For social workers and therapists, CQ action means consciously adjusting your approach. You might lower your speaking volume, use more formal language, or avoid certain gestures that could be misinterpreted. This could also involve adapting therapeutic techniques. For example, being more directive with clients from cultures that expect expert guidance, or incorporating family members into sessions if that aligns with their cultural values. It's not about abandoning authenticity. That's not the goal, but about demonstrating respect and ensuring that your communication and therapeutic interventions are received effectively and ultimately improving your ability to connect and provide support. It's important to reiterate that these 4 CQ capabilities don't operate in isolation. I'm going to say it again. These 4 CQ capabilities do not operate in isolation. They are deeply interconnected and work synergistically. Think of it this way. Your drive or motivation is what fuels your desire to acquire knowledge about different cultures. That knowledge then informs how you develop a sound strategy for engaging in cross-cultural situations. An effective strategy then guides you in taking appropriate action, adapting your behavior. And when your action leads to successful interactions, it reinforces your drive for future engagements, creating a powerful, positive feedback loop. Developing one capability often has a ripple effect, strengthening the others. This holistic approach is what makes CQ such a powerful framework for navigating diversity. So, why does cultural intelligence matter so much, especially in an inclusive workplace, and specifically in the fields of social work and therapeutic practice? Well, to be honest with you, the benefits are very extensive. You have enhanced service delivery and therapeutic outcomes. For social workers and therapists, CQ means a deeper understanding of your client's needs, their unique perspectives, and their expectations leading to the interventions and the therapeutic approaches that are not just clinically sound, but also culturally sensitive and truly effective. You have improved communication. This reduces those frustrating misunderstandings and communication breakdowns that can occur with diverse colleagues and clients. Stronger relationships and therapeutic alliance. CQ helps you build genuine trust and rapport with individuals from varying backgrounds, fostering more productive, empathetic, and effective therapeutic connections. A strong therapeutic alliance is foundational to good outcomes. Ethical practice. For social workers and therapists, CQ is directly tied to upholding core professional values, respecting the dignity and worth of every person, advocating for social justice, and demonstrating true cultural competence. Reduced bias and microaggressions. This CQ empowers us to recognize and actively mitigate your own unconscious biases and avoid unintentionally committing cultural insensitivities or microaggressions, which can profoundly damage their therapeutic relationship. Increased innovation and problem solving. Diverse teams and perspectives, when managed with CQ, lead to more creative solutions and robust approaches to complex challenges in social work and clinical settings. And last but definitely not least, and why CQ matters, is professional growth. Ultimately, developing your CQ cultivates a more adaptable, resilient, and globally competent professional identity, preparing you for complexities of modern practice. So I've told you about why CQ is important, but then what are the overall challenges that can happen when CQ is lacking? So the absence of cultural intelligence can lead to significant challenges, particularly in clinical and social work contexts. You can have misinterpretations and misdiagnosis. You might incorrectly assess a situation, a client's needs, or even misdiagnose a condition, leading to interventions that are off target or even harmful. Client mistrust and therapeutic rupture. When a client feels misunderstood, judged, or disrespected due to cultural insensitivity, it erodes the rapport, their willingness to engage with services, and can lead to a rupture in the therapeutic alliance, which is critical for healing. You then also have ineffective communication. Messages can be lost in translation, misinterpreted, or simply not resonate, leading to frustration on all sides and thus hindering the process and the progress. Burnout and frustration. Repeated cultural clashes can be emotionally taxing for both professionals and clients, contributing to burnout for the practitioner and a sense of being misunderstood for the client. You then also can encounter a challenge of ethical dilemmas. So without CQ, you risk unintentionally violating cultural norms, deeply held client values, or even professional boundaries in a culturally insensitive way, leading to ethical breaches. And then limited impact. Ultimately, your well-intentioned interventions or therapeutic approaches may fail to achieve desired outcomes because you are not culturally resonant or appropriate for the client's context. This underscores why CQ is not just a nice to have, but a professional imperative. So again, you can fail to achieve the desired outcomes because the interventions, the therapeutic approaches are not culturally resonant or appropriate. So This is where it's imperative to have cultural intelligence in your toolkit and use it strategically and effectively as well. So when I do these workshops, I like to put in place a real life scenario, or what I would say, what could potentially happen in real life. So here is a real life scenario that I have put together, and I'm going to talk you through this, and you can read it on the screen, and this will help in us putting into practice the 4 CQ capabilities. So to make these concepts more concrete, because I just gave you a ton of information, we're going to explore this real life scenario that potentially occurred between a social worker or a therapist, what you could likely encounter. So we have Maria, a social worker working with the Chang family, recent immigrants from a collectivistic culture. The referral is here for a teenager showing signs of depression. During her initial assessment, Maria, using her standard client-centered approach, tries to speak directly with the teenager. However, the matriarch, Mrs. Cheng, frequently interjects, speaking for the teenager and emphasizing family reputation. Maria, feeling frustrated, tries to redirect Mrs. Cheng, insisting on hearing directly from the teenager. Later, Maria suggests individual therapy, but the parents politely decline, stating they need to discuss it as a family. Maria interprets this as resistance and notes it as a lack of engagement, leading to the family becoming less responsive to her calls. As you read this and listen to this, consider what might be happening beneath the surface, right? So this is the overall scenario. And now I invite you to pause the video here for a few minutes and take some time to reflect on this scenario. And if you need to, you can go back to the previous slide to read the whole scenario again. What challenges do you see Maria encountering? More importantly, what cultural values or communication styles do you think might be influencing the Chen family's responses? Consider this from their perspective, not just Maria's, okay? When you're ready, resume the video and we'll break it down using our CQ framework. Okay, we're back. Or I would hope you pause to think this through and not just come to this next slide, but we're back. So let's analyze Maria's interaction using the 4 CQ capabilities, starting with CQ drive. While Maria certainly has good intentions and a desire to help, her initial frustration and her perception of Mrs. Chang's behavior as controlling suggests a potential dip in her CQ drive. It indicates she might be less motivated in that moment to deeply explore the cultural reasons behind Mrs. Cheng's actions. She's defaulting to her own cultural lens of individual autonomy rather than embracing the complexity. For Maria to enhance her CQ drive in this situation, she needs to cultivate curiosity. So instead of labeling the interruptions as controlling, she could shift her mindset to view as expressions of family care and responsibility, which is a common trait in collectivistic cultures. She could then sustain persistence. She being Maria, needs to recognize that building trust with a family from a different cultural background often takes more time and a different approach than she might be accustomed to. It requires commitment to finding a culturally appropriate way and an appropriate pathway to support. And then finally, self-reflection. So engaging in self-reflection, Maria could ask herself, am I genuinely open to understanding their perspective? Or am I unintentionally imposing my own cultural expectations on this family? This self-awareness is crucial for boosting CQ drive. Moving on to CQ knowledge, Maria's understanding of collectivistic cultures appears limited. She seems to be missing some key cultural insights that would help her interpret the Cheng family's behavior. Specifically, she may not fully grasp the profound importance of family harmony and the collective well-being of the family unit, often prioritized over individual expression. The significant role of elders, like Mrs. Chang is the matriarch in decision making and even speaking on behalf of younger family members. The concept of saving face and avoiding public shame, which can heavily influence a family's reluctance to openly discuss personal struggles or readily accept individual therapy, as that might simply imply a family failing. And the prevalence of indirect communication styles, where direct questions about personal feelings might be considered uncomfortable or inappropriate. So in order for Maria to improve her CQ knowledge here, it would be helpful that she does research, so conduct research and learn about the specific cultural values, communication patterns, and family structures prevalent in the Chang family's country of origin. Seek consultation. So reach out to her colleagues, supervisors, or cultural brokers who have experience working with familiar or similar communities. And then grasp space, meaning understand that the family's responses are likely rooted in their desire to protect their reputation and maintain harmony rather than being a sign of resistance to help. So you want to understand the face of the whole concept of saving face. Next, for CQ strategy, Maria's CQ strategy, this is where she could have planned her approach and made sense of the unfolding dynamics. Maria's strategy appears lacking because she didn't adequately prepare for the potential cultural differences, nor did she adjust her approach in real time when the family's responses deviated from her own personal expectations. Her direct redirection and immediate suggestion of individual therapy were not strategically aligned with the Cheng family's cultural framework. To improve her CQ strategy, Maria should consider doing a pre-assessment of planning. So before the home visit, Maria could have anticipated that in a collectivistic culture, direct questioning of a teenager might be met with family interjection. She could have planned for this. Also incorporate real-time awareness. So during this interaction, instead of feeling frustrated, Maria could have consciously recognized Mrs. Chang's interjections as a cultural cue, perhaps a way of showing care or respect within their cultural context, rather than perceiving it as a personal challenge or control. Then she could have adjusted her plans. So instead of directly redirecting Mrs. Chang, Maria could have paused, acknowledged Mrs. Chang's input, perhaps by saying, "Thank you, Mrs. Chang, for sharing your perspective." Then she could have strategically reframed her questions to involve the whole family and not just focus on the teenager. Or framed the teenager's struggles in terms of their impact on the family's well-being. Reframing the interventions immediately, instead of immediately suggesting individual therapy, reframing the intervention, which it could, because when you don't reframe in this instance, and you're suggesting individuals therapy, this is This can carry some stigma, sorry, woo, some stigma. So she could have explored family-based support or community resources that are more aligned with their cultural values and focus on collective well-being. That was a bit of a tongue twister, don't you think? But this is all good. Finally, let's look at CQ action, Maria's actual behavior. Her actions in this scenario were largely ineffective because they were culturally misaligned, ultimately leading to the family's withdrawal. Her direct questioning, redirection, and immediate suggestion for individual therapy did not resonate with the Cheng family's cultural norms. So for Maria to improve her CQ action, she could have done verbal adaptation, which means instead of direct questions, she could have used more indirect questioning initially. She could frame the questions in terms of how the situation affects the family as a whole, rather than just individual feelings. Crucially, she should acknowledge and validate the matriarch's role and input, showing respect for the family hierarchy. The nonverbal adaptation here is Maria should have observed the family's nonverbal cues, their body language, expressions, and use of space, and adjusted her own nonverbal communication accordingly. This might involve less direct eye contact or more patient pauses. Under intervention adaptation, instead of immediately suggesting individual therapy, which might carry a stigma, she could have suggested family counseling or community-based support groups, which might be more culturally acceptable. She should involve key family members, especially Mrs. Chang, in the problem-solving process from the very beginning, and importantly, emphasize how addressing the teenager's well-being contributes to the overall family harmony and strength. And then building a rapport. So here in these initial meetings, Maria should spend more time on building genuine relationship and trust rather than immediately jumping into task-oriented discussions. This investment in rapport is crucial in collectivistic cultures. So we're almost done, but I feel that we are on to the final culmination of all that we've talked about here, which is now developing your CQ action plan. So now it's your turn. We've analyzed Maria's scenario, and now I want you to begin creating your own personal CQ action plan. Yes, we're going to have some work. And even if you don't finish it here, I charge you all, and I hope that you all continue to build out your own personal CQ action plan moving forward. This is a crucial step for applying what we've learned. Think about a recent or upcoming interaction in your social work or therapeutic practice where cultural intelligence could play a significant role. It could be a challenging situation or simply an opportunity to enhance your practice. So the first step is I want you to identify a specific challenge or opportunity. Describe a situation where cultural differences might impact your interaction with a client, a family, or even a colleague. For example, perhaps you're working with a refugee family from a non-Western background who seems hesitant to share personal information, or perhaps you may have a client from a culture that emphasizes stoicism, and they are presenting with the somatic symptoms rather than directly expressing emotional distress. So take a minute and just pause on the first step and thinking about and reflecting and writing down your thoughts for the first point. And when you're ready, we'll resume the video for these next ensuing steps. So I'm just going to take a minute. And I hope you've written down your thoughts. Okay, so now let's continue building on this CQ action plan with the next step, which is focusing on the CQ drive. How can you increase your motivation or confidence to engage effectively in the situation you identified? Think about what internal shifts you might need. For example, you might tell yourself, I will remind myself of my commitment to cultural humility and approach this interaction with genuine curiosity, even if it feels challenging. Or perhaps I will seek out stories or resources that highlight successful cross-cultural engagements to boost my confidence, right? For the third point, the third step of this CQ knowledge, you may want to ask, what specific cultural information do you need to acquire to better understand the situation that you're dealing with? Be concrete. For instance, I will research common communication patterns and views on mental health in their country of origin, or I will learn about typical family structures and decision-making processes in their culture. For therapists, this might also include I will explore culturally specific coping mechanisms or expressions of well-being. Again, pause for a second if you need to work on these 2 points, and then we'll move on to the final 2 capabilities. All right, you're doing great. Don't be nervous. Pace yourself with all of this, because Rome was not built in a day. So let's complete the 6 CQ action plan with strategy and action. So for CQ strategy, how will you plan for and make sense of this interaction? Think about the mental preparation. An example might be, before the next meeting, I will mentally rehearse how I'll introduce myself and my role in a way that respects their cultural norms. Or, during the interaction, I will consciously observe nonverbal cues and pause to reflect on their meaning before responding. You might even consider, I will consider framing my questions in a more indirect or collective manner to encourage comfort. For therapists, this might also include, I will consider how the client's cultural background might influence their comfort with direct emotional expression and adapt my therapeutic approach accordingly. And finally, for CQ action, what specific behaviors will you adapt during this interaction? This is about the concrete do. So examples could include, I will adjust my pace of speech and use simpler, more universal language, or I will pay close attention to personal space and eye contact, adapting my own behavior to match theirs if appropriate. And a powerful one, I will prioritize building rapport and trust before diving into sensitive topics, perhaps by sharing a bit about myself first, if culturally appropriate. For therapists, this could also mean I will explore culturally relevant metaphors or stories to convey therapeutic concepts, or I will be open to discussing and validating traditional healing practices if the client brings them up. So now take your time to complete these last 2 points. I strongly suggest you pause the video now, and when you're finished, we'll move on to our key takeaways. As we near the end of this workshop, let's recap some key takeaways. First and foremost, remember that CQ is essential. It's not just a buzzword, it's a fundamental and learnable skill for all professionals, and particularly vital for social workers and therapists in creating truly inclusive and effective practices. Secondly, developing CQ involves enhancing the four pillars: your drive, knowledge, strategy, and action. They work together to build your overall cultural intelligence. Thirdly, intentional practice is key. Cultivating CQ isn't passive. It requires conscious effort to understand, adapt to, and bridge cultural differences. It's an ongoing journey. Fourth, the benefits are clear. There are better outcomes. When practicing CQ, it leads to improved communication, stronger client relationships, more ethical interventions, and ultimately higher professional efficacy and better therapeutic outcomes. And finally, as agents of change, your commitment to developing and applying CQ directly impacts your ability to advocate for social justice and serve diverse populations effectively in both social work and therapeutic context. It empowers you to be the most impactful professional you can be. So we've come to the end of our workshop on cultural intelligence for an inclusive workplace. Before you conclude, and before I conclude and close this out, I encourage you to take a few more moments for further reflection. So consider, what was your biggest aha moment during this workshop? What concept or insight resonated most deeply with you? Also think practically. How will you integrate CQ into your daily practice as a social worker or therapist? What's one specific change you'll make? Again, remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. Everything is an ongoing journey. And finally, what additional resources or topics would be helpful for your continued learning in cultural intelligence? Your feedback can help shape future learning opportunities, okay? I just also wanted to share at the end here of all of the resources that I pulled and reviewed. These are some great articles, heavy from a psychological standpoint, and just further understanding what cultural intelligence is and how it most definitely impacts your brain function as well. This is a burgeoning concept and construct. Cultural intelligence has only been in existence, I believe now for nearly 20 years, if that, a little over 20 years, to be honest. And it's forever evolving. And I think that's a great thing because we do see it constantly in all that we do. Or I would at least hope that you at the end of this workshop see the importance of it. So thank you so much for your dedicated time and your commitment to enhancing your cultural intelligence. Your efforts contribute directly to creating more inclusive and effective environments for everyone to serve. So I thank you so much for this opportunity and your time. I hope you had a good time doing this way how I had a good time doing this. And I look forward in continuing this conversation. And everyone, be well.
I hope you enjoyed this continuing education course from Agents of Change. Want to earn your CE credits for this course? Visit agentsofchangetraining.com or the link in the description to purchase the course and take the post test. If you're looking for more CEs, check out our unlimited plan. You will get unlimited access to 150 plus ASWB and NBCC approved continuing education courses for one low annual fee. We're always adding new courses. Did I mention we also have 5 free CE credits available too? Check it out at agentsofchangetraining.com.